welcome to the Monday, January 3rd, 2017 Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger, Councilmember Wagner,
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee,
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel,
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker,
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay, Councilmember Corsi.
Here.
Joyce and Brent let us know that they would not be in attendance this evening. We have nobody here from the public, so before we start with new business, except for Donna, she never wants to say much. I've asked Ryan Baker to be here, our wastewater treatment manager, because we finally got our Outstanding Performance Award for 2014.
How timely is that?
2014. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's funny.
With all those employees they have at Ecology, it takes better than 2 years to get this to us. Washington State Department of Ecology recognizes the exemplary effort and work accomplished by the City of Washougal and the dedicated team at the Washougal Wastewater Treatment Plant. Thank you for protecting and keeping Washington's waters clean. Ryan, thank you very much. We've obviously been at this for a few years now. This is number
Well, once they get us to 15,
The 15.
It'll be 10 over the last 15 years.
in a row. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Anything you want to?
Congrats.
Appreciate the support.
Yeah,
Absolutely. We appreciate the support. It means a lot to all the constituents as well as the operators down there, making sure that we're keeping Columbia and all the subsidiaries clean and safe for recreation and for the fish. So, very much appreciate it.
It's really hard not to support performance like that.
We do our best, for sure.
Well, and certainly kudos to Ryan as well. As most of you know, last year we invited him to join the management team and become the formal manager of the wastewater treatment plant. And we've been very pleased ever since. So thank you for all your continued efforts. Trevor, anything you'd like to toss in?
No, Ryan's pretty humble. Wastewater treatment staff and himself, they do an excellent job. Not only the mechanical plant, but inside Ryan's portfolio is the collection system. It's everything, the sanitary sewer collection system throughout the city, northeast and northwest, all the lift stations, trunk lines, odor complaints, whatever might crop up. That's what Ryan's tasked with on a daily basis, as well as the rest of the support staff. They do an excellent job, so kudos to them.
Thank you again.
And looking over a $17 million
Expansion.
just a small little project out there at the plant.
We're almost there. Just getting ready to button it up, so.
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to everything else, when you call down there with a stupid question, they answer it.
There's no stupid questions.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
You bet. Thanks, Ryan.
And crew.
Okay, moving to finance, resolution for federal reimbursements.
Yes, we submitted for reimbursement for one of our projects, the Traveler, informational traveler sign back in December, and got a nifty little reminder that effective December 1st, there has to be a resolution on file for the person signing those reports, which is me, that I'm legally bound for the, or legally binding for the city to be able to authorize request for reimbursement. So they gave us a draft resolution and we ran it through Ken to tweak it so that I can sign those and get reimbursed for, right now it's just the one federal project, but we do have other grants in the hopper. So this will allow me to be able to request reimbursement for those grant funds. It'll be on the agenda next meeting.
So this is something we're gonna approve tonight then? To have?
Next meeting.
Next meeting.
Okay, and that, is that common to have the finance officer be able to sign off on those things?
To a test for the reimbursements?
Yeah,
Traditionally, yes.
okay. And other
It's not a
fees.
payment, it's just asking for money back.
Right, yeah. Okay,
Yes, that's
thanks.
where I would like it to be.
Yeah.
Other questions? Professional services agreement with UPSIS Architectural. David.
Okay. Well, I mean, not to right to my presentation. The council, I'll have a brief presentation In your packet is a draft professional services agreement for a community center needs analysis and feasibility study. But it's been a while since we've talked about that, so I thought it would be good to just go over the background, describe the request for proposals, the RFP, and selection process that we used. And then we can talk a little bit about the details in the proposed professional services agreement with Opsis Architecture LLP, and then what the next steps are. So by way of background, you recall last year in our community survey, well, actually it goes back farther than that. There's been interest obviously in the council and the community on having some kind of an amenity in the community, call it a lot of different things. But it's always been a question of funding and scope and all of that. In the 2016 community survey, a council-generated question was open-ended. If you could have an amenity in the community, what amenity would you choose? And the overwhelming majority in response to that survey was, the survey question was some kind of a teen center, recreation center, swimming pool, community center. It took a lot of different names. When you added those all up, that was the #1 response to that question. The next question in the survey was, for the amenity that you just named, would you be willing to pay more in fees and taxes for that? And a very strong yes answer was provided. So generally when you ask about fees and taxes in the general notion of increased services, you get kind of a 50-50 response. That's pretty typical across most communities because it's a little more ambiguous when you speak more broadly. But if it's something very specifically that constituents are wanting to see, then they're more likely, as you can imagine, just like in your own life, you're more likely to step up to the plate and take on funding for it. That's what we saw in the community survey. So because of that, in your goal setting last year, your #1 goal for kind of that 2016-2017 period, got the most dots out of all the voting, was that we explore the feasibility and try to identify funding for some kind of a community amenity, community center, recreation center pool. So staff got to work to pursue your #1 goal. And so this is really the first major step now in pursuing that goal. In your budget, there's a new Parks Capital Fund, you'll recall. We appropriated $1.2 million in that fund. We seeded the fund with $295,000 from the general fund surplus for 2016. As opposed to adding that into the reserves, you wanted to put it into this new Parks Capital Fund. The rest of that $1.2 million is from park impact fees. $790,000 was appropriated for parks opportunities, but no specific projects named. As you can see, there's $400,000 or $500,000 that was specifically appropriated. So no specific amount was identified for this feasibility study because we didn't have an idea at that time about what that would cost or the scope of it. But there's appropriation in place for us to undertake the study. So we solicited proposals. We sent out an RFP. We did that last year. We received 6 proposals from a number of different firms. Many of them are partnerships where they're subcontractors. We had an evaluation committee review those. That committee consisted of myself, Trevor, Rob, and Shannon on the public works staff, and Lloyd Halverson also assisted us and reviewed all of the proposals. And then we scored those proposals on a number of different criteria, and the unanimous #1 choice, everyone had them #1, was the proposal from Opsis Architecture. And so based upon the overwhelming unanimous rating of that, we proceeded directly to negotiating a fee proposal. When there are architectural services involved, you cannot ask for fee in the initial response. You can only review qualifications, state law. Then once you've evaluated qualifications, the best qualified person, then you can negotiate fee. If you're unable to reach an agreement on the fee, then you would go to the next qualified respondent. but they were an overwhelming choice, OPSIS Architecture, out of the review group. So then we moved into fee proposal negotiation. And we did receive a fee proposal for them. We negotiated with them, and what's in your packet is what we're proposing now. So the scope of services that's included in this proposed professional services agreement with OPSIS Architecture, and I list up there Ballard King and Associates Limited. They are a principal sub to OPSIS. OPSIS and Ballard King have worked together on numerous studies just like this in the Northwest and in other parts of the country, but one of the reasons they were our strong choice is because they've done a number of these studies in Washington, and so they understand our statutory construct in our region. They've also done some work in Washougal and in Vancouver, and so they know our area too. So the first phase, it's a 4-phase project. The first phase is called the needs assessment. In your packet, there are details about what will happen in that needs assessment and what the deliverables are for that phase. Phase 2 is titled Program Analysis, and again, in your packet, you can see the fee proposal in it, and it gives all the details about what happens there. In Phase 3, it moves on into site analysis, program test fits, and pro forma. This is really the meat, if you would, of this study. This is where there would be, you would land on what the scope of the facility might be and which site or sites it might fit on. And then you would look at what would it really take to run that facility, to build that facility, and then to operate and maintain that facility. And it'll be very detailed. We'll talk about the level of staffing that you need, how much that staffing would cost, what your capital facilities maintenance costs would be, all your overhead, what types of fees you might be able to charge to get some cost recovery, and then the punchline of the whole thing, what level of subsidy, if any, would be necessary in order to operate the facility. And that's kind of the feasibility study part of it. And then they would compile all of that information in a final report that would come to the council, and that's expected in June. The process, I wanted to mention, the process does include an advisory committee, so we need to put together an advisory committee, and we were thinking that a member of the council should be on the advisory committee, and kind of thought that the Parks Board liaison might be the best person to fill that role. It won't be that many meetings, hopefully. And then there's some community outreach that can take a couple of different forms, particularly in that needs assessment part, and then again later just a double check on what we come up with. The fee for this is a not to exceed hourly package. That's $77,585, and then there's some specific things that they get reimbursement for as they come up, $8,000. Both of those are not to exceed numbers. In your packet is detailed breakout of each phase, what types of professionals are working on the project, what the hourly rates are. We have one from OPSIS for their part of it, and then there's one from Ballard as well. You can see all of the detail there. They both do quite a bit of the heavy lifting, but our agreement is with OPSIS. They're our principal in this. So the next steps would be, as is our practice, we present the information and then at a subsequent meeting ask for approval. In this case, that would take the form of an authorization for the mayor to enter into the professional services agreement. We will jump on this project immediately because time's of the essence. As you can imagine, we want to try to get some information back in June, potentially to inform budget conversations for some interim step. But typically for a project like this, we wouldn't be making major appropriations for anything in the 18 budget. You need more time. You got to start doing designs and things. But if we do decide to move forward with something, we would need that information for budgeting for next year potentially. And again, that expected report to council in this June. Now, sometimes we ask you to review something in work session and take action in the same night. You know, this is a relatively large professional services agreement, so we're not doing that. We know it is your number one priority coming out of your planning session last year, and we want to move as quickly as we can to get at it. We certainly wouldn't have a problem with you deciding to approve it later tonight if you felt that that was something that you wanted to do. I just wanted to mention that, but we're not asking or expecting that you would do that following our standard process in case you had questions over the next, actually it's 3 weeks until our next meeting. So if you decided to do that, we'd get started 3 weeks sooner than otherwise, but I think we can still deliver June. So I leave that to your discretion, and if there's any questions on the professional services agreement, that's in your packet.
I'm a little confused by the funding here. Surplus from 2015 was moved into the parks.
Into a new fund, the Parks Capital Fund.
I was under the impression it went into the reserves. Where did I go wrong there?
No, the council acted in a supplemental budget to move $295,000 from the general fund to the Parks Capital Fund, and that number correlates exactly to what the surplus was in 2015. That action was taken at some point in 2016. I can't remember the date that you did it.
Yeah, probably around March or so.
A
October,
bit later, yeah,
October area.
yeah, that was in the fall.
I was under the impression that if we had a surplus, it went automatically to the reserves.
It automatically does save a specific council action to do otherwise. And we made that proposal to the council, and the council opted to move it into the Parks Capital Fund.
For this project at that time?
Well, it was partly thinking that this, for this project, but it was also thinking of other opportunities like downtown, working on that, and then just parks needs in general. It's in- Excuse me?
At Schmidt Park, too.
Schmidt Park, it's just the entire portfolio, our parks portfolio is an unfunded or underfunded portfolio, like most of our capital stuff. So that's where the funding came from. Now, we did appropriate, there's 1.2 million appropriated in the Parks Capital Fund, 295 of which came from the surplus in 2015. The other, just under $1 million is transferred park impact fees. And of all of that, 790,000 is appropriated for opportunities as they arise. And this would be one of those opportunities.
Well, I gotta hand it to you. You've come after that money several times. You finally got it, and you got it by me because I didn't even remember that. I don't know whether I was absent or whether I was asleep that night. What's done is done. Nice going. I think this is a worthwhile project. I liked your contract, and I liked it particularly because of the deliverables in there. You don't just ask for them to hold a meeting. In the summary report containing the program test fits with the budgets and pro forma for each option, that's what you ask for. In other words, you put a measurable standard next to or in what you were asking for as a deliverable. That's the first time I've seen that. I feel that my time on the council is well spent. I can now leave the council knowing that I had an impact. Congratulations. I hope that you'll do more of that. Let's see. And I guess the other thing I would ask is there anything else in that contract that you could apply those types of measurements to?
Other things in this one?
Yes.
Well, let me,
For example, you ask them to conduct a steering committee workshop. And I think that's the extent of the deliverable.
Right. That's an information gathering session with the advisory committee, if you would. So the deliverable is take notes and report on the advice that's provided from the advisory committee. It's not a very quantifiable, measurable, if you would.
But I like this one because you just didn't ask for a report. You said it had to contain the program test fits with budgets and pro forma for each option. What a wonderful standard. You're really requiring something here, and I think government contracting should do that more often with the taxpayers' money. Thank you.
I just wanted to, for those who don't know, give a little history. Jennifer and I sat on a committee, I can't even remember what it was called, but some kind of rec center committee with Camas. The city of Washougal and Camas had jointly purchased a piece of ground out close to what is now called Goot Park in Camas, which is basically the south end of the BPA power lines just before you get to 14.
It was the Community Center Development Committee, CCDC.
Thank you. And they had been working on this for years, and they certainly had eyes bigger than their plate. What they ended up reporting was a splash pool. You couldn't swim laps in it. There was no deep end for diving. And they wanted to have really small children in it. The center would cost $30 million, and they were going to need, because of the babes and diapers, they would need to spend close to $1 million a year on water treatment. And along with creating a Metropolitan Parks District, which has the same kind of scary features as a Metropolitan Fire District, for funding, they were going to charge somewhere between $70 and $100 a month membership to use it. And it struck us that $30 million in public funds, and then you still need to spend $70 to $100 a month to use it, didn't seem quite right. And at that point, Washougal exercised its option and withdrew from the deal. And the property was repurchased, our share of the property was purchased back by Camas. Camas never went any further with it. At the time that we withdrew, they were basically promising to put a bond and a levy on the ballot, and they never did. That said, Camas's vision has changed significantly since those days. They renovated, they built the Lacamas Lake Center, their rec center out on Lacamas Lake, which to some degrees fills the needs that they had, but now what's going on is there is a pool in Camas, it's an outdoor pool, that is in falling apart shape. And Camas is just beginning a process to figure out what they're going to do about that pool. Are they going to abandon it? Are they going to repair it? Are they going to dig it up and replace it? So it seems to me as part of this, there should be at least informal discussions with Camas about, especially about this pool. It may be that we can create an interlocal here. I'm still averse to things like metropolitan districts, whether they're fire or parks. But it just strikes me that Camas has gotten, in my mind, a lot more reasonable about what they're thinking about in terms of rec centers and pools. And we may be able to find a partnership here. So at least informally, I would hope that there would be a discussion as part of this process.
We've already had a number of those informal discussions.
Okay.
And I didn't put it on the slide, but part of that needs assessment and program analysis includes examining partnership opportunities, not just municipal partners, but there are not-for-profit partners and
Why?
others, WISE, Boys and Girls Clubs, care providers. I hadn't thought of that, but that was suggested by the proposer.
And this may be a little small, but there's also the Kroc Foundation. The Kroc family is McDonald's, and after the old man died, the widow started giving away the money. And I know that they built a multi-million-dollar rec center in Salem, Oregon.
Michelle?
I just wanted to say thank you for looking into this and following the wishes of the council and the community on this. I think it's exciting. It seems really reasonable, the price that they gave us, I think, for the work that's going to be done. And I had a question. If you had heard in your time in working in the city of Vancouver of this type of facility ever being eligible for any type of grant money from the state, if that was something you had ever heard of any other facilities getting funded, something of this nature before.
You can potentially get some CDBG funding if your community, or you can show that the service area for it is limited to an income eligible area. Certainly a facility. That's why we were able to get CDBG money, for example, in our current community center to rehab it. But it had to be focused for seniors, for
Right.
example. So that wouldn't be applicable for us. I'm not aware of any state grants that are out there. There may be foundation types of grants that would be out there where in partnership with some not-for-profits, we might have a viable application. Direct appropriation in the state capital budget is always something that can be pursued. For example, we're pursuing the waterfront trail this year. Another year, we could pursue a share of the cost of a project like this, and I've seen things like that. That'll be part of this, the pro forma is, where's the funding, not only just to build it,
But to maintain it,
but
yeah.
to operate it, yeah. And I should say, just as a quick sidebar on this, the program test fits and pro forma will be done at an order of magnitude level for multiple options and at a very detailed level for the selected option off of those order of magnitude ones. If we wanted the excruciating detail for, say, 3 options, the price would be higher, and that's one of the things we did in negotiating it to get the price down to a more palatable level, was to do order of magnitude pro forma first, and then that should be enough for us to be able to go, it's too much, so. And another thing they've mentioned is most likely maybe a phasing type approach where you can deliver part of a community center with a goal, and the aquatic component is the big thing.
That's
Very
hugely
expensive, both to build and to maintain, particularly to maintain.
You said seniors were out of it. Could not there be a senior aquatics type program that would make it eligible or something like that, or?
Maybe, I don't know if you can have a multi-purpose facility where there's a thing that gets used, say, 20% of the time by an eligible group, but 80% of the time by anyone, and it's not necessarily eligible, whether you could apply for funding for the 20%. I don't know that we ever asked that question of the program. I thought we can't. It's like all or nothing. But certainly, we will pursue
Right.
anything we can in terms of grant funding.
Yeah, and I'd love to be on the committee for this, so yes, definitely. And then also, when it lists the civil engineering and landscape architecture, are we actually thinking there are going to be some rough sketches of facilities that might be available, or what are those categories?
So that would be for professional work to inform pro forma for the initial capital costs.
Okay.
You need to have some feel for what it would take to develop the site. And so you can get some takeoffs from civil engineers and others that work on site planning. But we're not anticipating that the deliverable would include, at this stage, would include detailed floor plans and building elevations. It's, what we probably see is, it may be a highly technical term like bubble diagram or bubble drawing. It's where they show you a shape and they say, okay, you need about this much for a big room and this much for a gym and this much for administration, but not necessarily a floor plan. That's not scoped in here. That would be like what we would move on to the next stage. If a pro forma and a program and site kind of gels out of this process and it looks financially feasible, and there's a lot to that, as you can imagine. It could be that in the budget, either in a supplemental this year or in the 2018 budget, that we'd be looking at an appropriation for that next step to build the plans for something. Because there's a potential voter ask in this, so you know, kind of take your steps and build your momentum.
Yeah, it's hard to see how you build it without a bond.
And last question, when they mentioned this working group that the two cities had possibly worked on before, was that a contract or was it just a working group between the two cities?
There
Was
was some
there someone
professional
paid?
involvement, but there was, Paul Dennis was on the committee when he was mayor at that point. I can't remember who the other Camas counselor was. But there was, and you,
Camus did some preliminary planning. yeah.
Just within their own departments, though, not, they
They-
didn't go out to,
No, they did.
oh.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
laid
they-
out
Oh, they did?
for some plans and some schematics and cost analysis.
yeah, they had conceptual drawing.
They did.
Okay.
It was OPSIS.
Oh, was it?
Oh, was it?
Uh,
Oh, I didn't remember that. Interesting. It's been quite a number of years.
It's been a while, and
Would've been
the
08,
context was
09.
different.
Yeah.
Kind of the scoping of the whole thing was different.
Yeah.
Other questions? Your comment about, your question about grants is certainly applicable. Battleground with their new community center and conference center they have out there, if I'm remembering correctly, was mainly built with state and federal funds. Patty Murray was able to get federal funds for that as well. So, but again, that's not a recreation facility. It's like Camus's conference center up on the lake is really, there's no recreation portion to it.
Nope.
Right.
Yeah, that's
So-
right. It's the
Did they
lodge.
get funding for that then as well?
I don't believe Camus did.
For the recent project, I'm not aware of
Seems
it.
to me that Battleground got both some federal funding and some state funding for their community center.
Yeah, I could ask
did.
Eric what they did.
Yeah.
That's why they
Federal funding was probably back in the day when earmarks were still
Yep.
happening, which would basically be like us, like we're asking for now for the trail. It's
Right.
kind of an earmark, if you would, capital direct appropriation. Theoretically, that's not the process out of DC anymore
At the moment.
at the moment, right?
Just talk about going back to it.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Certainly, if there's federal direct appropriation, we will want to get back in that conversation for sure.
Any other questions on it? Okay, that's all we've got for you for workshop. I don't have anything at this point. Any council members with anything?
I did forget to mention one thing. There's nothing in front of the council right now, but it's related to this. Actually, Lloyd made a suggestion to me. Right now, I'm project managing this because of the community-wide scope that it has, with assistance from Trevor and his team. Lloyd had a suggestion of looking to another agency who has dedicated expert staff that works in park and recreation, has seen some of these projects get built in different places, to see if there might be some in-kind, sort of call it senior advisor services, if you would, to the team here, just to kind of look over our shoulder and help us as we go through this. So I made that inquiry of the city of Vancouver to my colleague there, and don't have a yes or a no answer. However, in the course of doing that, their parks director did review the fee proposal, actually had a suggestion, which we implemented, was told that the fee proposal looked very reasonable and thorough and that it was going to do well. So it's possible that we might receive some sort of in-kind services as like a senior advisor. That would come at cost. If it's a very small amount, that's something we can do administratively. But if we decide to scope that a little bit bigger, if that made sense, we'd come back and talk about that here. I'll keep you posted either way.
Okay. Dave?
Is it appropriate to poll our colleagues and find out whether or not they would object to having this on the agenda tonight for adoption?
I think we can do it through general comments.
And,
To poll them might be stretching the standard.
Okay, well, I'll just say, I would be in favor of that, and I'll leave it at that.
if I were to be a stickler for procedure, the right place to bring it up is amendments to the agenda, which is first or second, third thing we do
Yeah, I was
in the meeting.
interested in having the staff prepared to handle it tonight, but I can do that. Thank you. You are a stickler for procedure. Thank you.
I'd be good with putting it on the, revising the agenda.
I am not stapling that PSA into my agenda.
That'd be great. We'll get going. We'll have to take the word draft off of it to get it ready for you to sign, but if we could get moving this week.
I think that qualifies as a scrivener's problem.
Awesome.
Great.
Okay, we'll be adjourned here right now and back at 7 o'clock. Thank you.